So, as I was saying, you are Dory.
That is me. I'm Dory.
We have a lot of similarities. We both don't drink. We have wild imaginations, and typically stuff I bring up to you or you bring up to me, it's like stuff that we both kind of thought about independently, and most other people can't relate because it's like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? So I think I always thought it would be good to like do this live with you, so we can just kind of talk and riff back and forth and just see where the conversation goes. So thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you for inviting me and like allowing me to be a guest on this thing that you're doing, Food for Thoughts. I just want to say, like, it's an honor to be a guest, and I think what you're doing right here is great. I think everybody can benefit from this right here because it's like what you're doing is spreading positivity and just inspiring the world. So thank you. It's an honor to be a part of this.
Thanks. So today we
You're
wanted to
welcome.
talk about our kind of journey or how we personally became self-aware, and like why is that even important, and I think that being self-aware is a combination of what your body and your mind is telling you and whether or not we choose to listen. If you're, like if you have like a physical ailment, but you don't take the time to be like, hey, why do I feel this way? Why do I get headaches all the time? Or why am I always tired? Things like that. There's always a cause and effect within our body. And if you take the time to listen to that, you can kind of understand what your body or your mind is trying to tell you, and then dive deeper and say, hey, what's the root of this issue? How can I remedy it? Right? What can I do to change that so I don't feel that way or I don't think that way anymore? And so becoming self-aware is really important in that process. We talked a little bit about this before, where like that's actually the first step in healing yourself, right? Not the acceptance part, because if you're
Right,
unaware of it,
acceptance. Yeah.
you can't
Right.
work on
How
it.
can you accept what you're not aware of?
All
Which is
right.
crazy. It's like we've always said, it's like the first step to healing or recovery is acceptance. But in actuality, it's the awareness of it, which is another like step to it, which a lot of people don't think about really, because it has to deal with making the unconscious conscious. Like you have to be aware. You even got a problem first, which is like the craziest thing because it's like apparently a lot of people aren't self aware, including me. Like it's crazy because like there's times when you thought you were self-aware and then you look at all the patterns that's happening and you're just like, oh,
It's,
why do I keep ending up in the same spot?
yeah. Well, it's crazy because like the moment you become self-aware of one thing, and then you do like some work on that and you figure out the root of it, and you're like, okay, well, I figured that out. So you kind of pack it back away and you're like, I solved that problem. And then something else happens and it resurfaces and you're like, I thought I worked through that. And then you realize
Mm-hmm.
there's more underneath. There's like layers to it where it you have to kind
Layers.
of pick
Yeah.
at it. And sometimes you can dive into it as deep as you can, but at the time your conscious can only go so far. And so you have to learn other
Yep.
things in other ways and then come back and apply that to the last thing you worked on. So it's like it's constant work. No matter how hard we try, it's like there's always things to be worked on within ourselves. And so self-awareness is a
Right.
constant thing. You have to kind of reevaluate yourself.
Yeah. And like you said, it's layers. And I think that was kind of like the biggest epiphany for me recently was like I thought, once you're self aware, it all clicks together. Nah, I learned recently that it's like you're self aware of one thing and like you said, you pack it away and you're like, you're cool. And then, the same thing keeps like something else keeps happening. And you're like, what is this? There's another element, another like layer of self-awareness. And they all, connect together. They're all intertwined, but it's just like, it's very complex where it's just not one epiphany. It's like a bajillion of them and different layers of it. So that I think, yeah, that's the key word right there. It's layers.
I like
Like the
you said
self-awareness.
complex, right? Like it is very complex, but at the same time, like for us to kind of work on it and be able to even just fathom it, right? We have to kind of take bite-sized pieces and we have to break it down to like one thing at a time. And that's why it's so much work and it takes so much time, because it's like I can't just solve all this in one go. It's like I have to look at every individual, I guess, aspect of myself that I'm self-aware about, that I want to make a change on, and then apply
Mm-hmm.
different contexts and filters to that. So like if I become self-aware that I don't know, maybe I'm always selfish, right? Like I'm always just thinking about myself. It's like then you apply that to all the situations where you think that way, and it's not just one, right? You're gonna, as you go through your life, you'll have reminders. But being self-aware of that fact that, okay, I'm typically very selfish, then every instance where it comes up and you're realizing, oh, I'm not being considerate of this person, or I'm not thinking about somebody else, you catch it quicker. And it's cool because the first time you do this and you become self-aware about something, every time after gets a little bit easier because it's
Right,
you're in that
right.
mindset, right?
Yeah, because you start, realizing once you start questioning it, you're aware of one thing, like you said, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, like I was subconsciously doing this. So like let's dive further into it. And then you're in another situation and then you have that same thought process of like, why? Right? And then you start
Yep.
questioning it, and then that's when you start realizing, oh my God, it's the same pattern that this shit's happening again type of thing. And it's crazy because it's like once you start opening up that like level of self-awareness, it just keeps going. And you mentioned something really cool, which I totally agree with. It's like a constant growth. You're constantly growing, and I feel
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of people have this misunderstanding of like there's a destination. And I'm right now in my current life right now, I'm just like, I don't think there's a destination. I think this is life. We're constantly growing, we're constantly trying to be self-aware. It's this ongoing thing.
That could be
And I
very
think
discouraging to
that's
people if you tell them that, where it's like, hey, this is a never ending journey because as you go through
yeah,
life, you're picking up new traumas. Like, we don't realize that in the moment,
exactly.
but it's like
Yeah.
the shit that happened today is something I'm gonna have to work through in 5 years from now, you know?
Right, right. But then I feel like if you have that level of self awareness too, I think you're able to work through it a lot easier.
Yes.
Instead of like, why is this shit always happening to me? Like my life sucks, da da da. But then once again, self awareness. I think it's the key. It's the first step to getting to your healing journey. As long as you have that self awareness, that tool, like you are able to overcome it or not overcome it or to like work through it a lot easier. And then there's other shit that comes with it,
Right.
but that's the first step is
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
That's the first step
So,
on your healing journey, is to be aware of the problems you want to work on, and then like how you actually
mhm.
accomplish that. There's layers and steps to that, but it's it's funny because like what's the saying, like the eye can't see itself, right? So sometimes it takes a friend or a situation where someone else points something out to you to be like, wow, like I really am that way.
Right.
And
But then you've also got people that were who aren't ready to see it, right? You point it out and
yes,
they immediately deny it, and they're just like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm not that way.
yeah,
And
if you're in
so
denial about it, then you're rejecting being
yeah,
self-aware, right? You're like, no, I don't even, like, that's not even something I would agree to. Like, I am not that way. But if someone's telling you, they're telling you for a reason. And so you have to be the one willing to take the time and be like, hey, like, is this true? And sometimes it's not, right? Where it's like sometimes it was taken out of context and you're like, I'm not a selfish person. You just don't understand why I made the choice I made in that moment. So you have to be self-aware of your self-awareness.
you have to be self-aware. That's a lot of self-awareness right there.
That made sense, right?
Yeah, no, no,
Self-awareception.
that self-aware redemption, man. It all starts with that. But it's so crazy though because it's like how people become self-aware. Everyone is unique in its way,
Yeah.
becoming self-aware, right? So it's like my question to you is like, how did you start becoming, self-aware? How did you start this journey of yours?
Ooh. I think initially the first thing that someone else pointed it out was like, yo, like it was like a homie check, right? Like, do you know that
Yeah.
you're this way? Or they pointed something out, and then initially, right, I'm like rejecting it, and I'm trying to validate or justify my actions and say, well, I did this because of this. But then as I was saying it, it was like something clicked, and it was like, but there is a level of truth to it. Like, yeah, I am that way. And so then you think about it and say, well, why am I that way, right? Like, is there something deeper rooted where it's caused me to act
Mm-hmm,
and think this way? Let me think.
mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of an example. I have like a few instances recently, but I can't like pin it right now. It'll come to me as we go through this. I have no good example
I mean,
right now. Do you have one? What was
oh no,
your
you
like
did.
first?
Well, I think recently, I've been on this healing journey of mine, which is very therapeutic, which is really good for me, and just like understanding who I am. But how I got there, it was a very like life-changing event that kind of forced me into that, to look within.
Right.
And it was like it was my recent breakup of like, oh shit, like that turned my whole world around. And what's crazy though is like before the breakup, or like back then, I thought I was self-aware. I'm not gonna lie, like it was similar to you. Like we mentioned, I think I remember you mentioned this before. Like I was in your similar situation where you thought you were self-aware, and you're like, man, I know myself very well, and you're like, I'm a good person, doing all this. And then I realized that I didn't know myself. Like I was not self-aware as much as I thought I did. It was just because I thought I was a good person. I did this, I did this, I did this.
Right.
And I was like, this makes me a good person. But technically it didn't, make me a good person, because like those were all done in my selfish reasons. And because of that, it manifested into something worse. And so that was a lack of self-awareness on my end until the breakup happened. I was like, what the fuck just happened? And I thought everything was, my fault. Went through this whole healing journey, trying to look within and all that stuff. And then once I became level-headed, I started seeing like my patterns. I was like, okay, something's wrong with me, because I started seeing the same thing over and over again. And I was like, it's not the outside world, it's something with me. So as I like started digging deeper in, I was like, whoa,
Yep.
all the shit I used to do before, I was like, I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I did it with good and genuine intentions, but not. It rooted from something within. Like it was my childhood trauma type of shit that manifested in the way that it did. And then it kind of like the glass shattered. I was like, whoa.
Like once you're aware of it, you can't like turn that off. Like it's there, and you see it every time, right?
Yeah, you see every time. It's just fucking crazy, because it's like one thing after another.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, once you start to have that level of self-awareness, you have this new pair of lens on.
Right.
And you see things just so differently. Like compared to before, you would see the same thing, but you would have a different mindset, or like thinking to it. But then once you have this new level of self-awareness, and you put on this lens, you're like, wow, you see things so much more clearer. You see things for like how it is compared to before, how it was so clouded.
Do you watch How I Met Your Mother?
I actually don't. A lot of people ask me that. I've seen a couple episodes. But.
So there's an episode where like the friends are all sitting around, and then one friend points out like, oh, you always chew on these pretzels at the table like super loud. And then there's like this noise effect as it pans everyone's face, where it's just like shattering glass, and they're like, the moment they all became aware of it, it was like it started to bother them. And so it's funny because it was like, it's not self-awareness, but just awareness in itself, right? But when you flip that lens that you were talking about inward, where it's like becoming self-aware of your own bad traits or bad habits, that it starts to bother you, where it's like, oh, like I do that all the time, and it bothers me that I'm that way. I don't want to be that way. But it's like, okay, so your story and your example kicked off one of mine, right? So I knew it would come to me eventually, but so me wanting to help people, like you said, it's like I felt like I was a good person, I had good intentions, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, I realized I was doing it for selfish reasons, because I was rejecting not wanting to look inward at myself. It was, if I can help other people, then the focus is on their problems, not mine and the things I can work on. It's like, let me help you through your shit, but let me just table mine and put it on the back burner so I don't have to acknowledge it. And then I realized somebody pointed that out and was like, this is your coping mechanism. And it was like that glass shattered, and it was like, I see it. Like when I'm on my way home, like just from being out or running errands, it's like, I don't want to just go home and work on stuff. It's like, I want a distraction. So I'm going to call a friend and either just talk to them or see if they're free and see if we can hang out. Or, if there's other people that I hadn't replied to messages and they needed something, it's like, yeah, let me reply to that so I can go and do that instead of sit by myself and reflect on all this shit. Because it's
right, because it's a lot easier to fix other, because you get that instant gratification where people see you as like, oh my god, you're such a good person. Makes you feel good, right? You're just like, yeah, I am a good person, but it's like you didn't look within, because it was harder to fix and focus on your own trauma and conflict.
Yes.
But it's just easier to do it for other people.
It's easier to like give advice than to take your own advice because it's so much more work.
For real.
Like I have to apply this
Yeah.
now. And so, but it's interesting, right? Because once I became self-aware of that, the intention and the purpose changed because I didn't want to lose that aspect of myself. I became self-aware of the reason, but then I changed the reason. I didn't change the method. Like I'll still do those things, but I still prioritize, like I'll set time aside for myself. It's like I need to focus on this, or I need to meditate on this, or I need to dive deeper into this that has been brought to my attention before I go and try to do something else. Because if I don't prioritize my own things, then no one else is going to either, right? And if they are, then they're doing that similarly to me, where it's like, let me help you through your stuff so I don't have to work on mine. And I don't want to be the cause for someone else to do that, right? So it's like I have to go and work on that stuff. And this actually ties into the other topic we want to talk about, right? Working on ourselves in order to help someone else with anything. Because we can't pour from an empty cup. So if I'm just constantly drained doing all this shit for other people, I get home and I'm drained, and it's like I don't have the energy or the time to work on that stuff for myself, which is very draining, right? Not physically, but it's mentally exhausting.
Mentally and emotionally exhausting, because it's like you, at the time, you know, when you're helping people because you think that makes you a good person, you weren't doing it because you wanted to. You're doing it because it makes you look good subconsciously. No one's going to be like, you know, like, oh, I'm going to buy you a cup of coffee. I'm doing it, and now you're going to think I'm a good person. Now, everybody, I feel like a lot of people do it, you know, subconsciously. They will be like, all right, I bought you a cup of coffee. Say I'm a fucking good person. You know what I'm saying? But it's all... like,
I want credit for this coffee, fool.
Hey, I'm a good-ass person now. Look what I did for you.
Yeah.
But no, like...
you said something I really like. You mentioned emotionally draining. Because I said, like, it's mentally draining, right? But emotionally draining, that's interesting. I've never used that phrase before, right? Something's emotionally draining. Like, you're just... You can peak with your emotions, right? Like, you have high levels of, like, dopamine or serotonin, and then you just dive down, or vice versa, where it's just, like, you've been sad for so long, it's like you're exhausted from that. So you're emotionally drained.
You know why you don't use emotionally drained? It's because you're a dude, man.
I have emotions, Dory.
I feel like girls are so in tune, you know, with their emotions and stuff. No, I was just fucking with you.
But there's truth to that, right? Because in my mind, I'm thinking it's mental, which is how guys think, right? Guys think very logically and less emotionally, whereas girls are very emotional and slightly less logical sometimes.
No, well, I mean, see, it's crazy when you mentioned that. Sorry, this is kind of off topic here, but when you're talking about the emotional and then the logical side, what I've also realized is, like, it's crazy because, you know, when you're at a level state, you can be as logical as you can.
Right. Like,
you're like, nah, this is it, very rational. But then once, like, you get a trigger, and then your emotional state is heightened, you're at a heightened emotional state, all logic goes out the window. What I realized is that emotion is going to win every single time, no matter how logical you are. When you're at a certain, like, emotional state, it's just like, you know, you just see red, which I think is, like, the craziest thing ever. Is like, how can we be both, right? Like, one time you're logical, and then another time you're emotional. They're battling each other.
They conflict and they clash.
They conflict and they clash. Yeah.
Until you become self-aware of it, right? Because I've actually noticed that, like, if something bothers me or I'm upset or angry, I'll actually pause and I'll catch it quicker than I used to before, where it's just like you kind of let that emotion take over, and you throw logic out the window, and you're like, hey, like, this is how I feel, this is what I'm gonna do. But when you become self-aware of that and you think about it, you pause and you're like, okay, I know I'm going to, like, reply to this, or I'm going to go and do something I'm going to regret. So let me just stop. Let me just still myself, let the emotion, like the peak of the emotion, kind of like come back down so that I can regain the logical control of myself rather than thinking. There you go. Yeah. I do want to just run it back, and we mentioned the gender aspect of it, but that is us generalizing the way that people
Generalize,
think,
yes.
right? And I don't want to do that
Yeah.
because there are guys that are very in tune with their emotion, and there are girls that are very logical, right? So we can't generalize that, because when we do that, it takes away the power
That was
for
me. Yeah,
the individual, right? And
that was
I
my
had this
emotions coming
discussion with
through
somebody else
unfortunately.
earlier today where it was like I hate labels because of the fact that it generalizes a lot, right? If I lump in
Hmm.
everyone of a certain category, that takes away their individuality, where each individual within that group is very unique and they have different qualities, interests, etc., right? So
That is fair.
so it's not all
My bad.
dudes and it's not all girls. It's just there. That's the typical, right?
That was
That's a
the typical. Yeah,
stereotype.
yeah. That's the general. That's a stereotype. Yeah, that's the general population, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's everybody.
Yeah.
You're right with that. But when you were talking about the whole self awareness of like the logical and then the emotional side, if you become self aware, you're right. Like I absolutely agree. Once you become self aware, you're able to stop and you think about it for a second. Like, whoa, like this is an emotional response coming. Like all these like thoughts that I have in my head, these are all emotional. So I think it's like it seems like everything relates back to if you want to work on yourself, self awareness is key. That is the first step right there. Yeah.
It's funny because all this stuff is self, right? This self help, self awareness. I know there's more. I'm drawing blanks.
Self awareness,
But
self
it all
improvement.
starts like within you, right? Like I could try to help someone as much as they want, but if they don't want to hear or become self aware about
Exactly.
that shit, then it's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
They'll get upset and
Yeah.
be like, "Hey, fuck you for calling me out on that. Like
Yeah.
that's not true."
Exactly. And it's just like how do you get that person to become self aware? I mean, there's not one advice that fits all. There's not like, okay, how do you become self aware? Step one, get a glass of OJ, drink it within 5 seconds, take a deep breath, meditate for like, and then you'll be self aware. No, it's not a one answer that fits all. And I find that really interesting. And that's interesting about like human beings is like we're all unique in that way
Everyone's
where
mind works
everybody has their
different.
own journey. Everybody's mind, yeah, yeah.
So you have to
So
kind of
because
find
everyone's
your
minds
way.
work different, yeah, and nobody. And you mentioned something really good is like you can tell them all they want, but they're not going to listen until they become self-aware of it. And it goes back to also like when you're trying to save someone. There's a lot of people, who tries to save someone, but you can't do it unless they save themselves. It all goes back to inner self, inner work. And I feel like a lot of people try to seek validation or try to seek help
Externally.
from externally, when really like if they,
And that's not bad
if
though,
they
right?
buy something.
Because sometimes like somebody else can help guide you or push you in the right direction, or just
Yeah.
be a sounding board, right? So there's no problem
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
But if that's the only thing you're going to do, that won't work. You have to like
Right.
listen to the guidance and then
Right.
apply it yourself.
Exactly. You can have the tools, you can have the support, you can have all the resources, but unless you do it yourself, unless you come to the conclusion that like you are going to make that change, like that shit ain't gonna happen. Like it's up to that person right there. And that was like a huge, huge learning lesson for me with the whole like saving people. With the whole like trying to fix others to avoid my shit, because before I became like very self-aware, I was like, if I fix the most broken person, that means I can fix myself. I was thinking about that like
Right.
subconsciously.
Yeah.
Like none
Yeah.
of this isn't like intention or like I intended. I was like, this is what's gonna happen. No, this was all subconscious in the
Yeah.
back
You
of my
just you
mind.
correlated it
And then
like this. I'm going to feel good if I help this person, right?
yeah, I would feel good. I mean, because at the time though, like you do feel good because you get that instant gratification, right? Like you help that person and that person's
Yes.
like, oh my God, thank you. You're so awesome. You're so kind. But is that sustainable? That shit ain't sustainable because you didn't work on yourself.
Uh-huh.
That's the thing right there. And essentially, you're pouring from an empty cup, right? That person just drained out all your energy. You're like, oh my God, that person, is so nice. It's like, oh my God, Dory, you helped me. So you keep doing that. But if they don't realize it, like if they're just relying on you to get that help, they're just sucking all the energy out of you. And then at the end of it, like it's a short-term solution, but long-term it's not sustainable.
Right.
You feel resentment, and that's where resentment builds up, and then that's where like
Ooh.
these like intrusive thoughts or like these actions, the way that you move very negatively. That's where it all manifests from, because you're pouring from an empty cup, because you're trying to fix somebody else without fixing yourself, when you gotta look within first. So that
That's it, right? Like, I couldn't have said that better. That is exactly it.
that was my skill right there.
But yeah, you hit the nail on the head there, and it's crazy because we're so used to instant gratification in so many other areas of our life, but self-awareness is like the last place you're gonna find instant gratification. Like, it doesn't exist there. It takes like not just hours, it takes days, months, years to do that and achieve a change, right? Because you're literally rewiring your brain to realize things about yourself and then make a change on how you think, act, or physically do certain things, right? Like whether it's your diet or exercise. Like, being self-aware is just constant work. So there's not instant gratification, even though we trick ourselves to be like, if I help this person that is like the most issues going on, like that'll help me be better. It's not, it doesn't
Right.
work that way. But we correlate it some way where it's like, this is going to give me what I need.
It's interesting, yeah, because that's how, like, that's kind of how our mind is flawed in a sense. It's like we always look for the instant gratification,
We're like,
and then like
I feel like
the
we're
same thing is
programmed
gonna
for
keep
that
happening.
though. Like,
Yeah,
like I'm hungry right
it's
now.
like,
One option is to cook, or I can just go to McDonald's. Like, it's there, it's available. I just have to get there, and the food is ready in like 2-3 minutes, right?
do you think that's like a primal instinct of like, okay, like kind of a survival mode of like, back then, you know, they didn't think about the long term. They were just thinking about, I gotta survive. I'm about to be run over by, or I'm about to be eaten by lions. It's like, I gotta do what I gotta do now. It's like, okay, today I got food, I got shelter. Okay, we good. Okay, now to the next day. Do you think that's like a
That's still not instant
like a primal
gratification though, right?
instinct?
Because I feel like that takes more work. Like, you have to go and you have to hunt your lion or whatever you're gonna eat, and then you have to build your shelter, right? There isn't. If somebody else came and was like, I'm gonna take over your village and I live here now, where there's already food and shelter, then that is more like instant gratification, right? Versus building that yourself. How did we get on
is true.
caveman shit?
I don't even know. See, that's how my brain works. I'm all like, you say something,
Do you think
and
the
then I like
cavemen
think
were
about something else,
self-aware?
and I try to like connect it together, because I always thought like emotions were so like, I'm such a logical person. I'm like, emotions really fuck with me.
Oh,
Because
you're like a dude.
I'm like a what?
A dude.
I'm,
I'm
yeah,
I'm
because
throwing that
it's like,
generalization back at you.
I mean, yeah, I always say though, I feel like I have a mindset of a dude sometimes.
The conversation
but
we
it's
had
true.
before this started was very aligned with that. Okay, we're off topic. Going back.
We're off topic, Jeff.
Okay,
Come on,
going back to
let's
self-awareness and rejecting the idea of it, right? So actually, I think my very first, I guess, interaction with self-awareness was as a kid. My dad would tell this story. Stephanie's like, Dory, you really are like a dude.
no, Steph knows, man. Dude, before she would like tell me stuff, and then she'll try to explain it, and then she's like, "So this is what's going on," and I was like, "I had no idea now what's going on at all." Like everything just kind of went over my head. I was like, "But you know, she said this. You know, like I took it as face value. She wanted
Oh
this,
yeah.
so I got her this."
The
And she's
perspective
like,
was
"No, but
different,
you gotta
right?
read in between the lines." The perspective was different, but it
Yeah.
was just like, as a dude, generalizing, like dude's mindset is like being oblivious and taking things as face value, right?
Yeah.
Like, you said you wanted this, so I'm gonna get you this. That's totally my mindset.
Like,
Right
if you
there.
want me to
I'm
do the
very
dishes,
simple.
tell me to do the dishes. You can't want me to want to do the
Exactly.
dishes. I don't want to do the dishes.
I was just like, you can't just be giving me all these like cryptic message and shit like that. I was like, I don't know how to read in between the lines. Just tell me what you want. And
That's a
just
skill set, though, to be able to decipher that, right?
That is a skill set. That
Keeping an
definitely
open
is a
mind
skill
and like
set.
being able to think that way takes you out of your comfort zone, and it helps with relationships and everything else, right? Like friendships as well.
That is true. I mean, So being open, I think everybody, should be open-minded. I do believe that, like, if everybody was very open-minded and receptive in, like, learning new informations and other perspectives, then I think everybody would get along in this world. But because, like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who are very narrow-minded and who aren't open
They aren't
to
even
hear other
self-aware
ideas.
that they're that way, though. That's all they know, right? And it's that comes
Right.
from, I guess, the environment you're in or whatever it is, right? Like we're
So
pretty.
what do you think? Is it nature versus nurture, or what do you think with that topic of it?
I struggle with that because there's that story of like two brothers grow up with an alcoholic father, right? And so one brother
Yeah,
grows
yeah, yeah.
up and he does the same thing. He's like, this is what I learned from dad. Like I drink heavy and this is how I solve my problems because that's what I learned. But at the same
Yeah.
time, the other brother is completely sober and he's like, I saw what it did to dad, and so I made the choice to not follow that path. And so their environment or their nurturing was the same, but they had different
They're
outcomes. So then was it
Yeah.
inherently in their nature for one to think that way and the other one to think the other way? Or was that at some point there was a crossroad and it was a choice? And so I think
Yeah.
it's a combination, right? Like the probability of you being a certain way based on your environment is very high, but it's not definitive. Like just because you grew up in this environment does not 100% mean you will turn out this way. The probability is high.
I mean, there's always the outliers. There's always the outliers. And
Yeah,
nothing is ever
you have a
100%,
choice,
right?
and that's the thing. You constantly have a choice. So at any
Either if it's intentional or subconscious, right? You have a choice. Either
Yes.
you know it, like the subconscious choice or not. Yeah. I just
the brother that
wanted to
chose
know
differently became self-aware earlier, I feel like, right? Because then he's thinking,
But yeah, and I think it's really interesting though. It's like he became self-aware. What I find really fascinating is like how people come to that, like to that mindset of that self-awareness. Like what made them self-aware? What steps took for them to get to that level?
I feel like it is external in most cases, right? Again, not generalizing, but I
Right.
feel like in most cases, the first step to self-awareness is external and it comes from a friend. And I was trying to say this earlier, but we kept getting derailed with funny shit. But so like as a kid, right, growing up, my dad used to tell this story about a businessman. So like my dad does work with Japan or with people in Japan, right? So somebody came to the house from Japan, and etiquette and everything is different over there. But he came to the family house and he was like in the home, and so it wasn't like in public or anything. But they were having dinner and they had like corn on the cob, right? And then
Okay.
like a pat of butter or like a stick of butter.
Yeah.
You have that on the table and you can butter your corn or whatever, right? The guy just didn't know any better, so he took his corn and he rolled it in the whole thing of butter. And that was just, he's like, oh, I need to butter it. This is how I'm going to do it, right? He wasn't trying to be rude. He wasn't trying, like, he didn't know any better. That was it. I think it probably was a cultural difference, right? But
Yeah.
my dad took the time and was like, hey, like, just so you know, like, that's kind of rude. Like, he kind of gave him like a homie check and was like, hey, I'm only telling you this because we're friends. Because I'm telling you in a private environment so that if we go out in public, you don't do this and embarrass yourself. Right? And so the way I see it is like your closest friends or the people that genuinely care about you will point out your flaws. And because you're already close, it's acceptable where it's like I'm receptive to this because I know you're not calling me out on my shit with bad intention. You're not just talking shit to me like, hey Dory, you suck at this. No, it's like, hey Dory, here's something you're maybe not aware of. I'm telling you this so that you can begin being self-aware and then accepting that part of yourself and then doing the work to rectify it to be your best version of yourself, right?
Right. But you know what I also find interesting is what I've also realized is that can be the opposite. Where you mentioned that
Okay.
your family member, or like a friend, like told you, hey, it's not supposed to be this way. So you're receptive because it's like a family member, it's a loved one. You're like, you're right. Like, thank you for watching out for me so I don't go out and make myself look like a fool. However, there's also lots of instances where they're very close as like either friends, loved ones, or partners, where you constantly keep telling them and they ain't gonna listen because they're like, well, like you see them all the time and they're just like, nah, like I don't know what you're talking about, you're crazy. But then when like an outside perspective or like somebody who they don't really hang out with as much,
right.
tell them, then they're more receptive to it. They're like, oh, really? When the loved one or the partner or someone who's close to them was like, I've been fucking telling you that. It's like, but why don't you listen to me? But you're gonna listen to that person that you
right.
met. That's right.
So there's like, ooh, this gets like there's levels to this, right? Because on one hand, you now have two individuals, right?
Yeah.
The person that's gonna like reject what their partner is saying, but listen to an outside influence, is maybe shut off or closed off on how they communicate already. And so within that relationship, those two people have to figure out how to effectively communicate. Because you could tell someone something over and over, but if it doesn't click, they're not going to make the change. And so you need to learn what their communication method is so that you can deliver a message that will stick, right? But if you're just like harping on like, hey, Dory, you always chew with your mouth open. And you're like, yeah, but this is how I am. Like, accept it or leave me alone. Like, whatever. But then if somebody else says it and then they become embarrassed about it, then you make that change, right? But you can still be the one to deliver that message. But if it becomes like you're just nagging, they're not going to care and they're going to reject it. They're going to shut off like whatever you're saying because they hear it all the time from you.
So it depends on how you deliver it. That's what you're trying to say.
I feel like your delivery method is one part of it. The other part is the person being open and ready at the time to be self-aware.
Ready at the okay. So see that's a key word right there. You said ready at the time, right? Yeah. Timing is also everything as well. If they're at a state where they can receive it, like level-headed and stuff. But there's a lot of factors to it, isn't there?
Right.
For somebody.
It's actually relatively complex for what we're talking about seeming so simple, where it's just two people communicating. Yeah. But like you said, there's multiple factors that play a part. Is that person in a mindset to listen to what you're saying? Are you saying it in a way they'll be receptive to? And then what other history is there, right? Like, this is just another thing you're upset about all the time where it's like, you're just constantly nagging me. Like, leave me alone on all this shit. Like, this is how I am.
Yeah, because you've already shut them out.
Right.
Because you're constantly seeing them and like, as a loved one or a family member, they're always going to be there. And or if we're talking about a family member from when you're little to when you're older, I feel like you're not as receptive to listen to them because they're always going to be there and they've always been nagged.
It's like our parents, right? Like growing up, you're like, I don't want to listen to you. And then at a certain point in time, like it just flips and you're like, damn, everything they told me before, like it makes sense now. And then you just...
And why did it make sense though? Is because like you've been through those experiences and everything they say became true? Is
I think
why it clicked?
The shift between them being like this authoritarian figure of like, if I don't do what they say, there's repercussions to my like livelihood. Like I'm living under your roof, I'm eating your food, etc., etc. But once you kind of separate from that, and then you realize that I don't have to just do what they're saying because otherwise I won't get like the necessities, and then you listen and you're like, you actually accept and absorb the information. You think about it, you're like, that actually makes sense. They're not just telling me that because they can boss me around, because they control everything in my life. Then you realize the value of the knowledge they're trying to instill in you, and it's like, why didn't I listen back then, right? It's like, as parents always say, like you'll understand when you're older. And that shift and change comes when I think you're not reliant on them, where it's like they're just bossing you around as a kid.
You're right. When you go out into the world on your own and you start making your own decisions and doing things for yourself without, like you said, the authoritative figure.
When you go out in the world and you start making your own mistakes, you're like, fuck, what did mom and dad say?
Yeah.
hey.
I mean, again, I always say this, though. I always say this is like, life is the biggest teacher. Like life, it comes at you, right? Like if you keep repeating the same patterns over and over again, and you don't listen to any of your friends or anybody who's telling you, it's like, nah, like I'm right.
Yeah.
But then life keeps throwing you back those lessons right there, and you keep ending up in the same shitty ass place. And then I think that is where you start. I think that's one of the keys to becoming self-aware. Is that life lesson right there? Is the experience that you went through. And I think that's like, um, and in my head, I think that's a majority of the people who start to become self-aware is the life-changing experience that they go through, that life teaches them. Because if you're not going to learn, if you're not going to listen to what people say, well, okay, then life's going to teach you the hard way because I was just trying to help you
Right.
out.
It's
I
crazy how
wasn't
like
sure
it's built into life itself where just these patterns, right? Like it, like you said, it's gonna repeat itself, and until you understand, like you're causing your own demise in one way or another, right? So like
you are causing your own demise.
if I'm going on dates and I eat with my mouth open and then there's never a second date, I'm like, oh, people just don't like me, you know? It's like, well, I told you before to stop chewing with your mouth open, and it's like, no, like that's not the issue. It's something else. And then after, the fifth failed attempt, it's like, okay, let me work on that. And then all of a sudden it changes. It's like, okay, that kept happening until I learned the lesson. But if I constantly reject it, it's going to continue, and I'm going to deal with the
Yeah.
same problem over and over, whatever it is.
Yeah. And then everybody is different in the way that they end up um,
Coming
learning it. Some people,
coming to that conclusion.
like once coming to that conclusion, yes. Like some people, it just takes one mistake. Life teaches them a lesson, and they're like, "Oh my god, I don't want to do that again." Some people, it takes multiple times. It's like the universe throws that shit at you, and you're like, "Whoa, what is that?" And then you try to like make an excuse for like, "No, nothing's wrong. Like that wasn't me. That's whatever." You kind of like bury it, and then it just keeps coming back to you, and you end up in the same shitty ass hole, and you're just like, and at a certain point, you start realizing you're like, "Wait a minute." I'm always ending up in the same shitty ass place. Like, what is going on? Because probably before you're thinking it was external. You're just like, everybody else is wrong. I'm doing fine right now. Like,
Yep.
everybody else is wrong. Nobody knows, like, my life and what they're talking about.
Which is true, right?
Until,
Because your perspective is always going to be different, but you still have to be conscious and say, what is the best for me with all of the circumstances that I'm faced with today? Because no one else has that perception. Even your closest friend still doesn't know all of the ins and outs of everything and the decisions you're going to have to make. So it's like you have to be self-aware to grow and develop that, right?
Exactly. And then to become self-aware, that's when you start realizing the patterns that you keep going into, and you're like, okay, now I got to look within. And then that also correlates back to your second topic of like, now that you're self-aware, you accept the shit that you did. You accept that you had a lot of unfilled trauma, and then that you acted upon that unfilled trauma, and you've accepted that, and then now you're on this journey of like, okay, now I need to work on myself. But that is also like a very slow step in itself. But once you start working on yourself, I also realized that like you are essentially filling up your own cup. Once you start working on yourself, you fill up your own cup, you start feeling lighter, and the way you move is very different. Like then you start once you start helping people out, not because you're people pleasing or not because you think that helping them is going to make you a good person, but because you want to do it for yourself, because it was out of love, it makes
shifts.
things a lot. Yeah, something shifts. And you're just like, wow, this feels good. Like for somebody who didn't fill their cup and they did it, in the back of their mind, they're going to have this like not resentment, but this grudge of like, I helped you out, like this is what I did for you.
It almost comes with expectations, right?
Expectations. There you go. Yeah, it comes with this subconscious expectations. If you didn't fill your own cup, it comes with subconscious expectations. And so when you get to the spot of like you're angry, some shit happened to you, and then your friend who you helped out wasn't there, then you start throwing it back at them like, what the fuck, man? Like, I helped you out right there. I did this, and you're not even gonna be here for me. That was because you were helping them out for selfish reasons. You weren't filling your own cup. You poured from an empty cup, which is why you had all that resentment subconsciously built up. So
it's crazy how it stems from like trying to help, and then it becomes toxic because of this one aspect of not being self-aware of why you're doing it.
Yeah, because it's like, the thing with society is like, how society paints you as a good person is like the stuff that you do, the way that you present. Like, you know what to do in that situation to make yourself look like a good person. A lot of people do that, and a lot of it is subconscious because I used to be like that. I used to be like, yeah, if I'm nice, if I
We
talk
both
like
did.
this, if I do this and this. Yeah, we both did, right? We were both in that same situation where we're like, yeah, man, we're good ass fucking people for selfish ass reasons.
But it's crazy because it's subconscious, so it's like you don't feel like you're being selfish, and then you realize it, and
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
your mind is blown. Like wow, like how like it's crazy, right?
Crazy. You don't realize that you're being selfish at the time because again, like nobody goes into it like saying, "I did this for you, now you owe me this." Like I'm a good person. Nobody goes in like that. But what we started to realize was that like once we got mad, we started getting, or once we were in a situation where like we weren't emotionally there, we weren't like the happiest, and some shit went down. We start putting out our anger on the people who helped us out,
Yeah.
and I think that's when we realized like, oh my god, we weren't.
It's like, why am I
the
doing
person. We
this?
weren't doing it.
What the hell?
Yeah, out of the kindness of your heart. You had all this resentment subconsciously built up for the people that you helped, and that's how you know like that's you didn't do it out of love.
Right.
And so that's why it's very important, to fill your own cup, because when you do fill your own cup, you're doing it because you love them, and like you don't expect anything back to them, like subconsciously. Hate when people expect things from you just because they did nice things. Yeah.
It's when you have like what's it called, like when you're keeping tally of the things you do for people, it's less genuine, right? Like, oh, I bought you coffee, you should buy me coffee. It's like, well, then you didn't really just buy me coffee because you wanted to. You did it because you expected one back, right? And it's like, I feel like in a coworker environment or like at work and shit, like that is more acceptable. Where it's like, yeah, I don't want to be the one buying coffee for the whole office every day. Like, let's rotate this shit. But if it's like your friend or something, then it's a little different. Where it's like, I'm not keeping track. I'm not keeping score. Fucking fan. I'm unhealthy and overweight. Well, you're a little late joining, dog. You should have been here at 8.
You're 50 minutes late. I don't even know who you are.
There was something else I want to talk about. Oh, with self-awareness, right? For another example from my personal life was taking. This is another one that somebody else externally pointed out to me. One of my friends was like, "Hey, you're single now. Take time to be single and to accept being okay alone." And at first, I was super rejecting of it, like, nah, like I'm gonna go and find a new girlfriend or whatever, right? But then, as I thought about it, it was like, yo, I really should, because throughout my life, that was how I would cope with things. It was like I would hop from relationship to relationship, and there would be, maybe 3 months in between at most, and then it's like, bam, I'm in a new one, and then it was the same thing where it's like, I'm in a relationship so that I'm focused on building the relationship or helping my partner, instead of taking time for myself and doing inner work. And like once I became aware of that, it was like, oh shit, yeah, like I'm gonna be like, I told myself like, stay single for a year at least so that I can do all this inner work and reflect on these things, because when you have a partner, it actually distracts you from all that stuff, because you're almost chasing all of that euphoria and the joy that other person brings you, which is good.
Yeah.
But not if it's a coping mechanism, right? And that's.
I mean, I think you were trying to find your value within someone else. I think maybe
external validation.
External validation, because you're like, okay, I'm gonna find another girlfriend, all that. You're searching for something that's gonna fulfill you, when what should fulfill you is yourself. Because if you're searching for externally, that shit can always be taken away.
Right.
Always.
And then that's why you spiral in a breakup where it's like, everything I am and my identity was like integrated with that person, so I've lost myself and I don't know what to do, et cetera, et cetera. But then it's like, when you take the time and you can stand alone and be independent, like fully, and you're fine single, you're happy single, then you're in a place where it's like, I can now be in a better relationship, because what I'm going to attract is going to be better.
Exactly. Attract and don't chase. And because you're doing, your work on your inner self, and you're filling up your own cup, and you're unpacking your trauma, and you're becoming self-aware, and you're taking all these steps to be a good person, to fill your cup, then the next person that comes along is you're not going to seek worth in them. You still
Right.
got the worth in you, but if anything, you're just sharing that happiness with them, which is a lot more healthier
You know your value and what you bring
than
to the table, so that you're not like
exactly.
trying to fill your empty cup with someone else's half cup as well.
Exactly. And then when that shit happens, that shit, manifests into this whole bunch of toxicity. It all stems, like it all derives from that. But
I've
it
been
all
there.
starts with you. It all starts with your self-awareness. It all starts with filling up your own cup. And I always tell people, it's like, it's nice to have instant gratification elsewhere, but remember yourself, remember your self-worth, and build up your self-confidence. Because when you do, you're going to attract the right type of people, the right type of wavelength and energy
Yes.
with that. If you're constantly trying to if you see in social media, okay, if you wear this and this, if you wear Balenciaga, that's going to make you, more attractive. If you're looking into that, that's an external type of thing. Then you're going to attract, and that's not something you like. If you don't like Balenciaga, but you're just wearing it because it attracts all the bitches, then
if you place value on that aspect of yourself externally, right?
On that aspect, yes. Yeah. Then you're just going to attract all the wrong people who are like that. So, in a sense, you guys are attracting each other toxicity because you weren't focusing on yourself. You weren't
on the individual.
Genuinely, on the individual, and so that develops problems already. But
that's
true.
Everything
is all connected.
It is, right? Yeah, I mean, we've touched on multiple areas of your life that all stem from self-awareness, right? And this is maybe someone's been living that, and it's now I'm self-aware from listening to this, right? So hopefully it helps someone somewhere. Let me look at these comments real quick. It looks like Mel said, got a comment on the Ikigai diagram behind you. Super awesome. Has helped me in my own healing journey. Yeah, I actually made this one because I saw some on Etsy and stuff, but they were not to my liking in terms of the way it was laid out, so I made one. Right now on the live it's inverted, but when I edit this for YouTube, I will flip it so you guys can see what it says. I'm actually going to do a video on that pretty soon. Ikigai is a pretty cool concept, Japanese concept. Fam's over here side busting.
Yeah, I'm listening.
So every time I get dumped, I go to him. He's tired of being a rebound. I call you because I'm lonely, dog. You make me laugh.
Your friend's funny. Your friend's funny.
Oh, you should see what he looks like.
Yeah. Damn. This is roasting right here, man. Dude.
Oh man.
Well, man, yeah, we touched on some very interesting topics that all connect within each other.
Yeah.
And I think what I realized is all these subsections of we talk about something and then there's a bunch of subsections. But then once I started realizing what it all connects back to is your self-worth.
Yeah, just
the self-awareness. Everything is self, and
yes.
Even though there's people out there who think if they do this, if they do that, that's going to make them full. I've realized that that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
You can't search it for externally.
It's crazy, right? Because you can try to find a new job that'll give you fulfillment, or you find a new relationship, or you buy a new car, or all these external material things. They're nice, but that won't help you with whatever is really deeper bothering you, right? You have to become self-aware.
It's not sustainable.
Yeah, it's instant gratification.
Instant gratification until you start going into the same goddamn pattern over and over and over.
It's I have this, but then why do I feel like this? It's there's something else within you that needs to be worked on. And that's where it's being in tune and self-aware of your body and your mind, because your body and your mind will tell you these things. When you start getting anxiety or you're just constantly thinking about something, it's trying to tell you something hey, that's something you should address, whether it's something you got to become self-aware of or something you're already aware of, and you need to continue to do that work and get to the next level, right? Because we're scratching the surface of the healing journey of self-aware being the first step, acknowledging it being the second, finding the root of the trauma being the third, then accepting that is the trauma and the reason as your fourth step, and it continuously goes on and on and on until you kind of find some sense of peace with it, right?
It continuously goes on as life goes on. you're still going to have other experiences as well. And I think that, may also play a part in your healing journey as you continue. But again, if you become self-aware and you have that tools right there, then whatever negative experience that comes, you're able to handle it better because you have the tools right there. So
Yeah.
I guess like going back to what you're saying, like it's an ongoing thing. And I think that's kind of beautiful in life though, because it's like you're constantly finding new epiphanies. You're constantly learning more about yourself. There's a lot of work to be done when it comes to just healing.
It's funny because like life is like a video game, but it's better, right? Where it's like you level up, but in a game it's like you kind of plateau where it's like, okay, well, I'm the max level now, whatever. But in life it's like you can't reach the top, right? Like you're gonna always be growing and constantly learning. Like until the day I die, like I will always be learning something. Like there's no way to know everything, right?
Right. I mean, if you do say you know everything,
You're ignorant.
The
more you know, the less you know, right? Like he who
the more
knows
you know, the less you know.
speaks less or whatever. Like what's the saying? He who knows.
We talked about this, bro.
Like yeah, that was our like what the 4-hour long conversation.
That was our 4-hour long conversation.
It was Confucius, right?
Confucius. See, there's a Chinese proverb out there about it.
This is the problem because like this is the one we found, right? He who knows and knows that he knows is a wise man. Follow him. He who knows not and knows not that he knows not is a fool. I was like, that's just too many words. I get what he's saying. There's a shorter version, like a much more consumer friendly one.
Yeah, no, but didn't we find one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't remember which one.
There's so many variations. He who knows does not speak. He who speaks does not know.
Nah, that's not the one I was thinking about.
We're over here talking. Does that mean we don't know shit? Denny says, "I think, therefore I am." Is that Plato or something?
That sounds like something Greek thing, which I am not very familiar
I think, therefore I am. It's Latin. René Descartes. I butchered that name. I don't know. Too many philosophical quotes.
Are you speaking Latin to me, or are you saying someone's name?
Oh, I think I read something in French terribly.
Oh. Yeah, that ain't your language then.
All right, I think we're coming up on our hour. We can wrap this up, but
Oh. Dang, it's been an hour already?
It's been an hour.
Oh, man.
Thank you again, Dory. This has been awesome. Always fun talking to you. I'm gonna call you after this anyway, but
yeah.
just to wrap up.
Yeah, no. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. For having me. Even though we touched on some very cool topics.
Yeah.
And like, I think speaking about this and showing this to everybody would be very beneficial because everybody can learn something from it, and we can learn something from them as well. It takes a whole village.
Yeah.
Learning from each other is going to help a lot and to open up our eyes. But anyways, like thank you so much for having me. I'm so blessed and glad that you invited me over here, and I'm so glad to talk about like stuff like this.
Yeah, it's always good to like get another perspective on something similar that we're both working on and kind of going through, and it's like your take on it. Actually, a lot of your take on it is very similar to mine, but there's subtle aspects where it's like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. And so I love that where it's like we're learning from each other at the same time, right?
Right. And I feel like we are on like similar wavelengths in that sense. Because ever since I met you, I feel like we've always clicked, right away. We've kind of had like the questions that we had and our thirst for curiosities are on very similar topics.
Yes.
And the way that we think in our mindset works very very similarly. So like, thank you, for that, and always like questioning me and making me think about life in a different way with your perspective.
Yep. And some foreshadowing. Maybe next time we can get Angel on here.
Yo, yo.
I saw her comment
No,
recently.
no,
I think
you know what? Well, you know what's crazy is because I legit had like a 6-hour conversation, with Angel yesterday night, and we were just talking about like topics that were very similar to this as well. And so that's what I told her. I was just like, yo, I think like you would really enjoy Jeff as well, because I feel like we all kind of have the same mindset in this like healing type of journey. So her perspective is crazy though. She makes me like think, I'm like, oh, that's a good perspective.
Ooh.
That's a good thing.
See, that'll be fun because you and I are like similar, so it's like, I kind of thought of that already. No, I'm just kidding.
I kind of thought of that already. Jeff is all like, man, I've heard that multiple times. Yeah, Angel loves to psychoanalyze.
Psychoanalyze. I like that word. Psychoanalyze.
Psychoanalyze.
Okay, yeah, we'll have to come up with another topic for that episode. Real quick, Angel, are you free? I want to see if we can get 3 people on here, just for the hell of it. Oh, I think I can.
3 people on there? How many people can you put on this thing?
I sent the invite. She can accept it. Did it work?
I don't know, she just said yeah.
I know. She's like, yeah, but I'm not going to join.
Yeah! I can't do it, but I'm not going to do it. Try again.
Try again. Invite. Oh!
Oh!
Okay.
What's up, you guys?
We can have a
I'm
three-way
so sad
conversation.
that I was only... What happened?
We can do this where all 3 of us are on it and we can all talk together.
Yeah, this is really cool.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I'm really sad that I was only able to join towards the end. I was like, it's 8:00, and I'm late.
No worries, because I'm gonna edit this afterwards and then I'll post it to YouTube so you guys can take a look if you want.
Okay, I'll rewatch it definitely.
But
I'm
no,
excited.
you're
I was
gonna
excited to watch it.
We're gonna do another episode with you. I'll connect with you after this and we'll see when timing works out. But I would love to pick your brain on something.
Yeah, me and Dory, we talked for how many hours did we talk for last night?
We talked till like 1 a.m. last night, but it's crazy because Jeff is like, he would love to pick your brain, but I want to see Angel pick your brain, Jeff.
I'm scared now.
Dude, I'm sorry, I want to see this conversation between you two because it's like you guys are very intelligent, emotionally intelligent in that aspect, but in 2 different ways. I want to see it correlate with each other.
Okay.
You've been through some trauma?
Through some trauma? I think,
Nice.
I'm pretty sure everybody has been through some shit,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Which is why we're on this healing journey, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
But it's
Something
crazy
brought us
because
here.
I feel like it's not like my trauma is not the same as a lot of people. Like it's not as heavy, it's not as crazy, and that may have been why I was able to like kind of get through it and figure some of this out a little bit easier.
I do feel like that gets overlooked just because you didn't have like this one big thing that like would have made sense for you to be so, self-reflective because you didn't have that one trauma that built. But life is like traumatic in itself.
That's true. Yeah.
Overall, we all go through stuff, and that experience too, I think, is different. It's like something I don't know because I had a lot of, but like Dory's situation too, like she experienced trauma at like a younger age, and then as life went on, it wasn't anything really big that happened, but more of like an accumulation of life that like steered her different ways.
Especially if you don't like work on any of that stuff, it just stacks, right? It compiles and it compounds, and then it just hits you one day. It's like, dude, how did it get so bad?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. We gotta save this. We'll save it for the.
Yeah, you're right. It's good. Oh, I'm so excited.
I'm already. We can do it now. Let's do it now.
Didn't you just get out of the movies though, Angel?
I did. I just saw Batman, so that's why when I realized it was late, I was like, oh. Which it was really good, you guys. It's really good.
There's a new Batman movie.
Okay, y'all hear that? Batman was good. Did you hear?
Yeah, with Robert Pattinson.
I don't know who that is.
All right, it's okay.
Robert Patterson is?
Robert Pattinson from Twilight.
Oh, That dude. Yeah.
Yeah.
The sparkly guy. Wait, he's Batman?
Edward from Twilight. Yes. Yeah, he's Batman. Oh my gosh, dude, you guys gotta get with it with the times.
He went from vampire to Batman.
Yeah, I love it.
Harry
I like
Potter
him as an
first.
actor.
What?
Batman, then Batman.
That's not Harry
Or
Potter.
Harry Potter. No, he was Harry.
He was in Harry Potter, yes.
But he wasn't Harry
Yeah.
Potter himself.
I know, but he was in that, universe. So
Was he Draco?
Yeah, he was a wizard of some sort.
he was a wizard. Yeah.
He wasn't
Like,
Malfoy, was he?
No, he was in
Oh, he was one of the older,
was like the
one of the older guys above Harry, right?
yeah, exactly.
The senior class.
Spoiler alert: he dies.
Spoiler alert!
I agree.
Geez.
I mean, if you haven't watched it by now, it's your fault.
Oh, you're not talking about
I know,
Batman.
exactly. No, I'm not talking about Batman.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's her
Cedric,
name?
yeah.
Zoe Kravitz is Catwoman too in this one.
Zoe.
I know we're getting Cedric Diggory. Oh my god, I had the biggest crush on him.
Zoe
Harry
Kravitz.
Potter.
What else is she
Harry
in?
Potter. Yeah, he was Cedric Diggory. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what his name was. But then he died, real quick.
Yeah,
What
I
else?
cried.
I feel like Zoe Kravitz has been Catwoman before, or is it just she has the look for it?
Yeah, she does. She's got that fierce look.
Yeah.
I need to see that movie.
I haven't been to the movie theaters. Well, actually, I saw Spider-Man, but it was empty.
I still haven't seen the last one. What do they call it? The one with Doctor Strange.
With all of them. Oh, it's really good.
Yeah,
You should watch it.
Yeah, I
I'll
heard
see
it was
that.
good. Yeah.
There's also another Doctor Strange coming out in 2 months or something.
Ooh, the Doctor Strange one have really good visuals. It taps into the multiverse, right?
No. This is my sister, guys. We're on the live, and
What's
my
up?
sister.
What's up, Evie? What's up, Evie? Angel Mom's at mom.
Yeah, I know. I'm glad I got to join you guys for a little bit.
Yeah, I'm glad you hopped on too.
thank you
This is
for-
cool. Now we know we can add multiple people, so this will be fun.
We can figure out what we could do for next time then. That'd
Yeah,
be dope.
we'll
That'd
come
be
with a
dope.
topic.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna end the
Yeah,
live.
cool.
Hey, Dory, I'm gonna call you back though.
All right.
All right,
Alright,
bye guys. Thanks
All
again.
right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Angel.
Right now, more than ever, everyone is addicted to instant gratification and life hacks to a happier life. The reality is that anything more fulfilling takes time and effort. We're willing to invest in devices on Amazon that'll save us 5 minutes in our day, but we're less willing to invest in ourselves, which can stretch our longevity by years. What we consume, both in content and calories, plays a huge part in our physical and mental well-being. I want to make a difference by sharing insightful knowledge into our own psychology. For years, we're force-fed what to think and what is acceptable. I'm here to break us out of that copy-paste mindset so that you can reach your full potential. I need your help spreading this knowledge on YouTube by clicking the thumbs up button, leaving a comment to let me know what you think of the video, and most importantly, subscribing to this channel. This has been another episode of Food for Thought.